Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And by the way, I'll do the Bitcoin trading cards anytime you want.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, Mr. Jeff Booth, thank you so much for joining me today and being a playable character here in a sea of non-playable characters. Thank you, sir.
No problem. Great to see you, Brandon.
So yeah, I always joke with everybody. There's not a lot of critical thinkers nowadays in this world. And Jeff, for anyone who knows you or doesn't know, you should say, the author of one of my favorite books, The Price of Tomorrow, and the general partner of EgoDeathCapital. So I'm not gonna won't have you go into your background. If anyone wants to check that out, Jeff wrote about that in his book. It's a phenomenal book. I've given it to many people, and you have to go read that so you can check out Jeff's bio there. But a real estate entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur over the last 30 years. And now in the Bitcoin space, doing that, but now in the future that we're building and that Jeff's building, and so that's why he's here today. So we're gonna jump around a little bit here today. I told you in email, I some of these podcasts, I have some visions for it going forward of just kind of doing some different things, getting people together over time as we grow the podcast, and whether it's eating hot wings together, I don't know if that'll be it, but just growing things and getting outside the space is, again, it's the adoption thing where we have this. I don't know if it's a marketing thing or branding. I'm not going to call it problem, but we have to get outside our bubble somehow. So in saying that, price is a thing that everyone wants to talk about, obviously. So we'll touch on it a little bit today. But you recently talked to Nico, I think in the last few months, of Simply Bitcoin, and talked about $92 million Bitcoin. Now, there's a lot of nuance to that. So some people would say, oh, whoa, what the heck, could you explain what that is? Like, what world are we living in at that point? Is it Mad Max? Because governments have to print hundreds of trillions of dollars in order to get to those points. What kind of world do you foresee going forward into the future here? We just talked about the children offline, stuff like that, and the future generations. What do you see when you kind of look on the horizon here and what we're about to enter here in the coming decades?
Yeah. So one really important point. I didn't say 92 million.
True, you said 46. Bitcoin. Yeah.
No, yeah, but I didn't even say 40. I said the implied value.
True, right. Correct.
On a measurement. Yeah. And so that became clickbait to drive clicks. So because
that's why I want to start here. Yes. Yeah. We're seeing it all over the place. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So and a lot of people. So all I just compared is the balance sheet of the world today, 900 trillion, that has $400 trillion of debt. That balance sheet would not be 900 trillion if the $400 trillion of debt was insolvent. But the $400 trillion of debt is insolvent, right? So in other words, all of the assets that you're mispricing because you think the debt is solvent are included in that asset value of a balance sheet. And it's a good way to frame, because if you imagine you're inside, you Brandon are inside that balance sheet, and you have your assets of your house and your car and everything else that are all some total, and your debt against it. Mm-hmm. If you have a whole bunch of clear assets, then you can continue to spend based on that, right? So you think your wealth would be included in that. So your spending power, how much you think you have, is based on that. Now, if all the debt became insolvent tomorrow and it all failed, then all of the house prices and all of the money in the bank wouldn't be there, and everything would collapse to, let's say this, it sure wouldn't be a $900 trillion balance sheet. It might be a $100 billion balance sheet, because there would be nothing left, because it's the entire thing is based on pieces of paper having and those pieces of paper, that debt being solvent. So now if you divided that 900 trillion to think in purchasing power by 21 million, you would get about $46 million, or $43 million per Bitcoin. And now make up for lost coins. How many lost coins? It would be higher. It would be higher than 43 million. But then if you realize that in 5 years, that $900 trillion balance sheet won't be 900 trillion, and the debt won't be 400 trillion, because if it was the same, the entire thing would collapse, because it has to grow exponentially to be able to keep it solvent. In other words, money manipulation has to grow exponentially to keep that system solvent. And you're measuring everything from that money manipulation. So call that a $2 quadrillion balance sheet at the time, with maybe 1.4 billion or 1.4 quadrillion being debt, maybe more, right? As that explodes, is essentially you're driving inflation, destroying currency values to be able to do that. It might be higher. Then measure Bitcoin at that time, and the purchasing power, right, of that Bitcoin, even if it had doubled, hadn't actually doubled. It's just the balance sheet you're measuring it from. So it's trying to, it's what I was trying to do is say, what is the terminal value of Bitcoin in today's purchasing power? And that's only one side of that kind of, that's only one side of that argument. The other side of that argument is the 43. If you just said 900 trillion today was fixed, 400 trillion was fixed today, and 21 million is fixed today, then because the free market is deflationary and exponentially so with technology and everything we're moving, then the purchasing power of the 43 million expands infinitely over time, because relative to other things that are falling over and over and over forever, that purchasing power increases. So that's what I was trying to describe. But a lot of people took it as a comparison against the U.S. system, which it was only a comparison against the dollar-based system or the fiat system to show how ludicrous that example was.
Yeah, no, and I love that you did say implied volatility, or implied value, I should say. And so that's a great point, because you're seeing it all over the place. So I'm really glad you clarified that, because even I misspoke what you said. And that's very important, because we're seeing this all over. And part of it too, I was talking to Luke Broyles about this in meeting people where they are, right? And we talked about increasing adoption, which is increasing education. And you have to talk about price a lot, right? Because it's an important aspect, obviously. At the same time, it's, for me, like I was just telling you offline, I played hockey my entire life. I was watching the news as a kid. I was, studying finance, the great financial crisis, like I told you. All these things really got me into this 15 years ago. In politics, I was even before that in high school. And I always thought I was the weird one. And it just didn't make sense. And then eventually I realized, oh, I am the weird one. I got along with everybody, but it was just like, oh, maybe I am the weird one. And to me, it was like, why doesn't everyone care about these things? Is it the fiat that just brainwashes people for 100+ years? And that's why people aren't thinking about this, and they don't seemingly care to a point where it's a decision. It's a decision to use different money, and that's all it is. Is it just the 3%? I think of the Revolutionary War here in America was fought by the 3%, really, or at least in the beginning. And you just need that small intransigent minority. How should we be looking at it in terms of, people are looking to educate, adopt Bitcoin, get people to educate, the podcast, whatever it is, the work you're doing. I mean, you go on stage and talk to thousands of people. What should we be doing as Bitcoiners looking to increase that education?
I think everybody's doing it. And this is such a change in society and change in what's happening in the future. So, and people, what would be natural? Like if a couple of those first principles, free market is deflationary. The natural state of the free market is deflationary. So we know that's the first principle. As a result of that, we can say we've never actually had a free market for any length of time. It's been a control system that's stolen that money from us over time. And the end of those control systems ends up in war throughout history, where you set the dollar and say, promise not to do it again. And then it happens again. And so our entire history is filled with that error code. So, and that's why you kind of have to ask, if Bitcoin is decentralized and secure and is different, and society has never seen that before, then the rules on top of that are completely different. And what happens in the future completely different than all of our history books that contain the error code. Well, that would be a really hard thing to understand if your future is informed by your past. But whose future isn't informed by their past, because they're constantly thinking. So all of our knowledge came from the knowledge before it, and we're on top of that. So why this would be really confusing? It would be obviously really confusing. And even within Bitcoin, there's a whole bunch of people that talk like they totally understand it and don't. And they're somewhere along moving, kind of unwinding because what they're trying to do is they're trying to attach their previous knowledge on top of a protocol that doesn't care about their previous knowledge. They're trying to carry their all of the other things that this changes, and they're having a hard time kind of regrouping on what this means. And it's way easier to, if you know that that's why I kind of break this into chunks. And I say, if it stays decentralized and secure, the first thing you would do is, okay, first attack it. Why won't it stay decentralized and secure? And do everything you can to say, okay, what are the attack vectors? But once you assume that if you assume it will stay decentralized and secure, now you have to, you have to start from the future that means. You have to start in first principles and what that means for where this world's going, instead of dragging all of your previous knowledge to describe how this will work. By the way, it's the same thing in business. It's why most times the monopoly cannot see the innovation, because all of their people that created the monopoly are stuck in the belief system of the monopoly. That's all that's happening here. But now you could say every one of us is somewhere along a line, a paradigm of understanding the new system, and that new system takes time to be able to kind of the people's minds to change and understand what that looks like.
Do you think it's again offline we were talking about the Titanic for some reason. It's just like the analogy I use all the time with people, and it does seem to work, and people kind of get it in that sense of like the fiat legacy debt based monetary Titanic. That's the system we're in. It's going down, and it's like even voting and all these different things. And I know people ask you about elections and voting and politicians, and we can get into that. We don't need to necessarily, but it's, I think of like election, like voting. You're trying to vote for a new captain after you've hit the iceberg, and it's like, well, what is that going to do? Like like you said, it's this same system. You're rearranging deck chairs, and the lifeboat is Bitcoin, and you have to get off. And real estate, like we were saying, like real estate looks really good. It's the last to go into the water. So it's just very weird. Like you said, it's like a step function, an order of magnitude difference, where people have that hard time seeing it. Speaking of, not a hard time seeing it maybe, but George Gammon, you the last year or two, you guys have gone back and forth, kind of over and over again. And I think you guys seemingly got to a place where even he admitted himself that he's like, hey, we agree on everything. It seems to be like time horizon, or maybe that's not the best way to say it, but he thinks that people seemingly, I'm paraphrasing what he was saying, but he doesn't think people change as much as you will. Like, we know Bitcoin changes people, it's changed us, right? It's changed our lives. Where he says, hey, I don't know, like maybe it's another fourth turning 100 years from now. Do they learn the lessons of the past? Like, how do you see that? Because like I see both your arguments. I land on your side. I get what he's saying though, of like, oh, hey, 100 years from now, us that lived through this, how are 100 years from now, how are people going to know the ills of fiat? They're going to be like, well, they're really good, they're really frothy, let's do funny games again. How do you respond to that?
So this is actually why those conversations are so important, and people take sides. He's a tarot, or he doesn't get it, right? And then they got all inflamed about their idea, and I have no problem talking to somebody that doesn't quite understand my point of view, or because
we want to thank our sponsor. This show is presented by Bitcoin Trading Cards, an orange pill in a pack, making talking about things that normally make you want to cry fun and easy. The scarcest and most educational cards to ever exist, available now.
Because the measure of the future, you could have no measure of the future. You have to use first principles and understand kind of what's going to happen. So inside his argument, what he's actually saying, if you dig down, he's saying Bitcoin won't say decentralized and secure because we won't let it. Right? That's what he's saying, because he's saying it'll get captured by humans. Because and I'm saying it won't, right? And this is why, because once you have an insight of something like this, how important decentralization and security is for the world that we're moving to, you add your voice to it, and you defend it, and you protect it, and you're building new innovations that become that are further decentralizing and securing that network. And he's arguing history has never seen that. He's right, and I'm right.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But again, if if it stays decentralized and secure, that's why I kind of point on that. And then I want to dive a little deeper into that on what I see. But why I say that specifically is it attaches his belief into my belief. And it says, okay, then tell me how you're going to centralize this. Tell me how. Because unless you can tell me how you're going to centralize it, or all of the attack vectors that you can try to centralize it in, then this doesn't care what your belief is. It doesn't care. It doesn't care what my belief is. It doesn't care what George's is. It doesn't care, because it doesn't care if a government wants to print 30% more currency units against it. It doesn't care if the government wants to expand the government by 50%, 100%. It just doesn't care. So you have to go a deeper level, and you have to say, okay, tell me how you centralize this. And that is the foundation, I think, the difference between those. He believes it'll be sometime human action will force it to be centralized, and I don't. And I've done so much work to and by the way, the attack vectors that I see on this are so much more extraordinary than what even many of the Bitcoiners think. Because I've done that work to realize most people will be like George, complaining about the system that they're making stronger with their very actions. Right? Most people will live pricing Bitcoin, pricing from the fiat instrument, making it stronger through their actions. Just about every, and so how could something stay decentralized and secure against that force that we were making stronger while making ourselves weaker? Those are the things that I really wanted to dig into to understand what Bitcoin looked like and how it's created that decentralization and security and scale to 8 billion people. And that's also where our funding path and what we're funding has been, to be able to make sure that those rails are complete, that it can't be stopped. Because if you just, so right now, I'll give you a really simple example. If you started with if you started with Bitcoin on layer 1 is decentralized and secure and can't be broken after every nation state attack possible and every bit of FUD possible. If you realize that that's already happened, it's behind us, and there's no way to attack Bitcoin sufficiently enough that you could centralize it, then you would have to, from that point, control layer 2. We are early in the innings of all of the exact same attacks happening on layer 2, and most Bitcoiners are actually making those attacks stronger because they're getting caught up in the misinformation of them. So this is something that expected, built technology to stop. That's what Fediment is, right? Right. That's what Breeze is. So because you could see what would have to happen way before it would happen, right? It would have to, because if the systems we're talking about are incompatible together. That makes sense, right? Yes. So one allows prices to fall for humanity. That's Bitcoin. One has to steal that productivity. Those are incompatible. So how would you make that incompatibility compatible? You would. I'm telling you what I would do if I knew this. I was Dr. Evil and I knew this and I had to make this. What I would do is, okay, I've lost layer 1. Let's make sure layer 1 is tied to the US dollar, and let's win layer 2. Yeah. And then I could go from gold to petrodollar system to Bitcoin, and I could extend the same game for another 20 years. So that we're very early in that game.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was just watching a couple of tweets the other day. I think Pierre Rochard was kind of going back and forth with some people. He had, lightning's a psyop. It's this and that, and we're kind of touching on that in a way. Like, I think, like you said, people are experiencing cognitive dissonance in a way. Like, we're going up a layer, and now people are like all over the map now. Now you have people in layer 2, they're learning about layer 2, and then you still have a lot of people on layer 1 just learning Bitcoin. And most people don't even understand Bitcoin, or, the first layer. So we have, like, it's starting to be this, the fog of war in a way. So it's really fascinating when you start looking
And
at
it's
it.
not it's not lightning that's a psyop. It's all the things. It's all the things
people,
trying to fight against it.
Yeah. Yes.
But he, if that's what he was saying, I didn't.
No,
see
Pierre
it.
was not. He was saying
He's
that
right.
it's not. People were attacking him, and he's like, "What do you know? Like, no, it's not."
So seeing through the fog of war, when some of those same people were convinced that layer 1 was going to be broken because of the because of the energy psyop or anything else, right? Or it's just moving to layer 2, and anyway, I start from the principle this had to happen. It was inevitable that this would happen. It would be inevitable that people would be more and more confused, and even smart people within the Bitcoin space would be confused. Inevitable.
Yeah.
And I've been investing my time elsewhere for a long time to be able to make sure that there is no psyop that could take this down. We're moving to a truthful and abundant future on Bitcoin. Period. Why? Because that's who we are as humans. It's going to be chaotic against this. It's going to be super chaotic because the system that extracts from you will do everything to keep you in it. Fear, more extraction, believing there's a savior in that system that is going to give you this to be able to extract something else. That's a system. It's not a person. It's a system thing, and you have to remember you make it stronger with all your actions within that system. And so if you're, I say, pick the thing you're most concerned about in the world, and try to solve it with broken money or a broken layer 2, right? To drive that, and you'll quickly see that you're the node making that system stronger with all of your screaming at it and yelling at it. And if you understand that, tune it out, move over to time and build on the honest layer, honest protocol, and because that's where we're going, and more people are joining us every day.
Well, it makes me think of so many things. I want to talk about the mining pools, the centralization. I know, like Bob Burnett, there's a lot of people talking about that right now with Ocean. I want to touch on that in a minute because we're going down this vein here. But I think it was Saylor. He was saying that one of his biggest concerns, because in wrapping up the George Gammon thing, because again, like you said, what I took out of all of it, phenomenal arguments back and forth, or debate, I should say, very robust. Very high level, and you guys are 99% aligned. And I think that's the thing that, like you said, people like take sides. And it's like you guys are saying in general that very similar things. And Saylor's thing, I believe he said.
Can I just pause you for? Can I pause you one thing just and then keep going? The reason I want to pause you there is if you understand where George has come in the last 3 years from some of these conversations and from many, many back channel conversations with him to get to the period he is now. He was way further away from this, and now he's really now he sees. So why would George be any different than any other person, including me before I was here? Right? You have a framework that you're trying to defend, and the new framework is breaking down all of the other things of the framework, and you let go of a lie one finger at a time. And so that's just where George is just on that path, and now and so instead of screaming, just welcome him to the path. And now, where do we disagree? Why do we disagree? What is the specific thing in there? Okay, sorry.
It's great. I mean, I know you've said this before many times too, but it's empathy, right? And we kind of touched on it with Luke Royals. I've talked to him many times about it, right? Meeting people where they are. So that's part of it. The Saylor thing I was just going to mention was that his concern, because this kind of came full circle with the George thing of Bitcoin changing you. And the Saylor thing was, his big concern wasn't technical. It wasn't some dark back alley thing. It was just humans having the unwillingness or the willingness or unwillingness to have sound money. and to be educated on it and understand the, like you always talk about this system of inflation, this fiat corruption versus, hey, we have this thing we're building over here. So that to me is just, it just brings a full circle of, like, again, you look at a Saylor who's saying that same thing a different way, but the very same thing in essence, and just educating and building that world. In saying all that, though, do you think, like, I think of like Ben Bernanke's paper from '02, deflation, it can't happen here, which probably got him the Fed job, right? And then you have the IMF paper in 2012 of, about repression is the way to go. In your mind, is it better to have just this inflationary, just take a decade or a couple decades and inflationary, and like we just gives us runway to build Bitcoin? Because the other option, I guess, is what, deflation and just into oblivion, just quickly, boom, depression, and like just collapses. I mean, how do you? Because I used to be the guy who was like, when I was younger, as a young kid, right? I was telling you earlier, go, like, it's merit rules, like it's gonna be like it's gonna collapse. Well, let's go, let's get ready for the crash. Now I'm probably more on the side of like, hey, we need runway, we need decades of inflation to figure this out and give us a chance.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what I want. It like really does. It doesn't care, right? So Bitcoin is pricing a free market system, which is deflationary. And if you hold Bitcoin, then everything will fall over time according to Bitcoin. And you could be, now, if it only becomes layer one, where Saylor largely is. So let's say the risks of layer one. He does identify with some of the risks. I just say humans are terrible at predictions. Yeah. Terrible. But watch the talking heads on news, you almost get paid more if you're wrong more.
Yeah.
Right. And look at the entire financial system that people keep on talking about, these experts that couldn't be wrong more often. Mm-hmm. And then they keep listening for the next time and the next time and the next time. So do yourself a favor, look at who's been right in their predictions over and over and over again, and lean more, not that they will be right, but listen to them and say, what are they saying? And you probably more signal. Saylor has been right a lot of things, even back before, and where Apple would be and what that would look like. He made a big bet. He was later to Bitcoin, but he made a big bet, understanding, and he did his work to be able to understand this and how networks grow. So why that's important is, if you couldn't change something, if something was unchangeable in Bitcoin layer one, then what you do is you try to create something else, right? Because you wanted to be the guy, right? Ethereum, I'm going to give more fun. So because these Bitcoin maxis won't change this, right? They're too hardcore, which is actually which you want in a protocol. You want something that's unchanging or very little changing, because most people building onto it will be misunderstanding the risks, because they're really bad at seeing the future. So they're terrible at it. And then you'd have a whole bunch of people thinking that they're really good at it and trying to create, no, it needs to do this, but they would be too bad at it too. So what makes Bitcoin resilient is that it takes this time, and it forces this through all of us as nodes to ensure that you don't blow this up. And so that's a huge part of layer one, and it takes away our need to change something just to put that increases the risk, right? So that's actually the beautiful thing about Bitcoin, through the nodes and small blocks, to allow more people to run nodes, to be able to keep this decentralized and secure. Critical piece. But Saylor's right, because we control it. It's actually us. We're the nodes. And if we're the nodes, then we also are influenceable to a state attack or a misinformation attack that tries to slide something in that we don't see. And as you get better and better with information or AI, you might be able to change people's minds into some of this, and this the attack to insert something. So he's right specifically on that. How do you stop that? How do you stop that attack? You have more of these conversations, and you have more people that are defending this network
Yeah.
that other people will go to say, hey, what do you think about this change? And there's so many of those people now that it provides massive resiliency for this network, and those people are getting smarter and smarter and smarter, and more attuned to what this looks like, which means that protocol, that layer one protocol, ossifies.
So in saying that, I wanted to touch on the centralization of the mining pools. Obviously, this has been a big thing recently, and the Bobernets. There's many people that have been talking about this and talking about as you do always say, as long as it stays decentralized and secure. There's many facets of Bitcoin. This is one of those obviously major facets where there's there's consolidation of pools, and people are getting worried about things. Choosing which what block is what are we going to use, and just the censorship aspect in general. I guess that's what people really need to know. I guess. So what is your take on just the pools, where we're at with that, and maybe concerns you have or don't have, or how people can hey, we're going to start our own ocean, and we're going to do this, and we need to start going back the other direction. What is your take on all that?
Yeah, I think this is going to decentralize further too, and there's no worry here in the long run. In the short run, there's some specific, but people are aware of those and building the options. One of those options is ocean, right? Yeah. And some of and there's lots of different options that are emerging. The other thing with kind of big miners is a lot of the big miners are not as efficient kind of on the new machines and the new capital, because they have the older machines or their energy. And so it forces decentralization of this network just through the free market and competition over and over and over. So that's not where I would say, if I was focusing on attack vector, I would focus higher in what's happening right now with what I said on layer 2. Anybody that's talking about Bitcoin as just a store of value is actually, whether they knowingly or unknowingly, is actually also becoming a threat to Bitcoin, because that means it has to be captured at layer 2.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I remember Saylor has been saying, and I feel like he changed his tune in a way. For a while he was saying it's property, not currency. And again, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but he was venturing. Moral of the story, he was venturing away from, hey, it's money, currency type of thing, and he was, hey, it's property, it's property. I always took that again just as nuance and having to understand the situation he's in and the scrutiny he's under. But it seems like he's even changed the way he's been speaking about it over the last couple of months. To your point of, you have to look at it as everything. It's not just a store of value. I know people try to reframe it as that. So I think that's really fascinating. So that's, again, aside from there. But I wanted to.
And actually, if you go into that, let's say you're a public company. Mm-hmm. And regulatory and there might be a perfect reason, even if Saylor knows exactly what we know, which I suspect he does. There might be a perfect reason to be able to make sure that it can live on as layer 1, and you can, to help the attack vector there, to be able to say that. But there is Bitcoin doesn't allow the world to transition to abundance unless it's also a layer 2, and unless it's actually money. Otherwise, it's just maybe I'm a little bit, or it would take a lot longer to get there, because it would just play the exact same game that we've been playing for the last 70 years onto Bitcoin rather than the petrodollar system.
Yeah, it's a whole nother. What do you? I guess I wasn't even planning to ask you this, but what are your thoughts on bricks, and, like, again, a lot. I ask you to mind read, which is never a good thing, but I mean, just what bricks and what's going on there. Where do you kind of see things falling? I mean, it just makes no sense to me that, again, you're like, oh, we're getting rid of the dollar. hey, it makes sense because if we weaponized it here in the West, but they're going back to gold. I understand they own a lot of gold, so it behooves them in that sense, but it also would behoove you to start buying Bitcoin if you're many of those countries. Where do you kind of fall with just kind of the currency wars that are going on right now?
Sorry, I just missed the last part, but I think I got your general question. Most people in the world are playing the game as it has been played for all of history, and if they can control money and extract a little bit of the productivity that flows to people, then they can create a massive power and use that power to their advantage. And the more people that you're extracting from, the faster deflation is supposed to be in the market, and the faster that you're able to extract, the more power you gain at other people's expense. So most people in the world today are playing an extractive game that is really a prisoner's dilemma, with each person losing as a result of that extractive game. China is also playing that extractive game, and they're playing it in some cases better than the US, because you have a controlled society. In China, you're not going to win against a controlled society by being more controlling. So essentially what they're doing with Belt and Road, and whether it's Venezuela or any of these countries, or Russia, they're giving better terms than the US. Mm-hmm. Right? They're creating debt traps. They're creating all the same thing, and they're giving better terms. But for China, one, to be able to be open currency unit for the world, that means their currency would have to fluctuate, and they won't do that because it can't in a closed market. So I have no worry about BRICS and all this nonsense. US dollar is going to get stronger. A lot of these countries are going to fail against the US dollar, and that means all imports, raw materials and labor, get cheaper in the US, and you can extend the game for a long time from the US dollar system. But all parties are playing on a game board that doesn't exist anymore on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a cooperative game rather than an extractive game. And if you want to play the extractive game against it, you're going to eventually be repriced by it anyways. So
in saying that, in transitioning a little bit, what makes you? I was listening to some of your recent interviews, and you touched on it a little bit, but there's the people that were, hey, what's the point? You're talking about venture capital in the Bitcoin space, and you're just saying, I think it was Scott Melkers actually that came out in the last day or so, and you're saying that Bitcoin is going to reprice even the people that are trying to play games on the layer 2s, 3s, whatever it is. How do you square that circle with people who are saying, well, then, yeah, why would I invest in anything? Why would I do anything if I can just hold Bitcoin? What's your simple answer to people?
It's actually the most simple thing in the world, right? So if you were in Argentina in 2000 and you could invest, actually, before I do this, if you're in the US, why would you invest in Google? Why don't you just hold cash? Because you think Google is going to have a higher return than your cash. So you're predicting your return rate, your risk-free rate of cash, and you're predicting the value you're going to create for people, and value that you're part of the value creating for people out of that. Okay, now you're in the US and making that choice, cash versus investing in a company. Why would you do that? Because you can get a higher return rate. Of course you do it. Now you're in Argentina, and you can take your currency that is going to be worthless you're in 2000. Google's just emerging, and you can see the Argentina peso is going to be worthless in 24 years, and you can invest it now into Google's growth and cash flows in US dollar. That'd be a pretty good trade, right? Because you'd have venture returns on top of an asset that wasn't losing value as fast as your Argentina peso. That would be a pretty good return. That's all that's happening in Bitcoin. It's the same exactly the same thing, except for Bitcoin is repricing all currencies. Mm-hmm. So the IRR of Bitcoin for the last 15 years is 45%. So that means my rate of return hurdle needs to be plus 45%, or I won't make an investment. And I can't find anywhere with an existing system, houses, anything where I can make a rate of return of 45% a year. So you would just invest in Bitcoin and just hold it. But what if you wanted to make a higher return rate? Wouldn't it make sense to do the exact same thing that Argentina, that toy example I gave from Argentina to Google? Wouldn't it make sense by building on top of the infrastructure and technology on top of Bitcoin and helping other people? And those companies are creating more and more balance sheet or more of their revenues in Bitcoin. You're building, so you have the rate of return of Bitcoin plus the accrual of Bitcoin on your balance sheet by creating value. So we're having what we see is venture type returns on a venture type asset, because why we're seeing it is we understand the true rate of return implied by Bitcoin, and that's 45%, and we're investing where we can beat 45%. And the only way you could beat 45% is by creating a Bitcoin company that's increasing your Bitcoin on your balance sheet by creating value. So it's for me, it's I can't believe more people can't see it.
Is that the Saylor trade or the Saylor playbook then? I think
no, his is very different.
I think of the Burr. Sorry, really quick, because I want you to explain this, because I think of the if anyone's familiar with real estate, there's the Burr method. The last 10 years got really famous, and I've employed this many times, of raising money and then buying the asset, buying the property, or I guess the debt, if you will. So using other people's money, getting the financing, fixing the house up, putting a tenant in, and then returning all the capital, and then you have an asset. I didn't pay anything for it. Infinite return, right? So I guess this is where I think of like what Saylor's doing. Then there's what you're talking about, which is different. It's a venture, like you said, venture capital is a company, and they're getting more Bitcoin into and holding on their balance sheet. So I'd love for you to kind of walk through these couple things and how they kind of, I don't know, relate, or just even parse them out for people.
Yeah, so they're very different strategies. If you have cheap access to capital, and you have an operating business that's profitable, then you can lever that through cheap access to capital. And if you're safe on that, especially if you hedge out some of the risk on this, you can use the cheap access to capital, and you can use the inflation inherent in what's coming to drive the higher value asset, which is in this case Bitcoin. That's what Saylor's doing, and he is killing that playbook now. And so he practically invented I think Pierre Rochard talked about it like 2013 or 14, and that would happen. And Saylor is become a master at that. And so he's using an operating business to be able to do this. I know lots of people that are doing the same thing in smaller businesses, similarly, which is actually the same thing that you just said in real estate. All real estate is a short on a currency. Right? Yeah. You're buying an asset, and you know that the currency must be devalued. Yeah. And so you're taking a leverage against an asset, and Bitcoin is a better asset, far better asset than real estate in that. So what we're doing is different. Yeah. Right. Some of our companies, as they become profitable and they have lower costs of capital as they become really profitable, we'll do the same thing as Saylor's doing and extend that.
Okay. Yeah.
But what we're doing is we're building companies. We're building the new Googles. We're building the new right. Yeah. Here's an interesting thing in this ecosystem too that is so different. I think I kind of intuited, but I was surprised at how fast it came. A lot of the companies don't go from seed to Series A to B to C to D as they're spending more and more marketing to get more users. They go to seed to Series A, and they're profitable, and they're adding the Bitcoin to the balance sheet every month. And so they don't have as much dilution. It actually looks like venture capital used to look like 20, 30 years ago, when venture capital could have staggering returns, because it's actually the true free rate of or is the true real rate of return, which, as I said before, is 45% per year.
Just wild. Absolutely wild.
It's wild.
Yeah,
It's wild. But those are two very different strategies.
Yeah. How do more people, not real estate people, not see that playbook? Because like to me, like I didn't think about it that much. I thought about it a little bit, and then I saw Saylor doing it. I'm like, that's the Burr method basically. And like real estate people, that's a huge thing the last 10 years. Like, how do people not see this?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that they don't see it is real estate has you
get financing.
You can create. Yeah. You can get because there's a renter in it.
Oh, true. Right? Yeah.
And so because Bitcoin, you can't do that. You have to have a different operating business to have a profile to hold you through the highs and lows and the drawdowns. Otherwise you'd get liquidated. That's why most people. So people are overvaluing the tenant returns because they're valuing it in fiat dollars.
Short term. Yeah.
To be able to take on more debt, and this is a far better play.
My goodness, there's a list a mile long of things I want to talk to you about, but I know we're getting towards the end here in our 10 minutes or so. What I want to talk about the future briefly here. What do you like? I would love to get just a minute or two of your kind of your thoughts of just like whether it's small modular nuclear reactors or like Amazon, for instance. And I know you've got thoughts in this space. Like Amazon, to me, with what you talked about again 5 years ago in the book with 3D printing and all the things that are coming, I see them as a materials company eventually. Like those warehouses are just going to have materials and you're going to order and then they're going to send you the material. They're not going to send you the little thing because you're going to print it at home. Just things like that. Like what do you see in the next 5, 10? Like life won't even look the same 10 years from now when we look backward at it. So like what does Jeff Booth see?
Yeah. So there's such radical changes coming. And from both systems. So one of the things right now, what we're kind of getting into is economies work and weather systems and our bodies work under chaos theory, right? And they're not linear. And what a lot of the prognosticators that are talking about on TV, they're talking about one variable in all of the different variables, and they're talking about exactly the straight line on what you can expect. And it's so much more complicated than that. You cannot talk about the one variable because all of the other variables conspire, and one little change somewhere else can change your entire model. And so in how complicated this is, like what you're getting at with what I wrote about with 3D printing and when that's, because it's coming, is just when is it coming?
Right.
Tied to AI,
right,
which is a different variable. Tied to the monetary system, which is a different variable, tied to Amazon's monopoly right now, which doesn't have actually any benefit, right? All of their incumbent costs to run their monopoly right now is at a disadvantage, except for their users, to the new where it's coming. That's decentralized further and further out. That it doesn't require that same type of system, to energy systems all decentralizing, and all of the variables in between. It's really hard to give say what does Amazon look like or what does this look like, because it's informed by all of these different ideas and these ideas from the free market that are creating all of these things that then crash into each other and create other things. So that's how that's why I try to, where are the things that I know are first principles? Where are the things so if I know those are first principles, I know those things are true. Now, what do those imply to what other things do I believe will be true over time? And where are the pockets of opportunity to kind of watch how how it plays out, or be a part of how it plays out?
Yeah. Did you see the really quick side tangent? Maybe you just said something that made me think of it, but I just saw something like yesterday. Did you happen to see the guy he's like a former NASA guy who like broke gravity? They were saying like through like static electricity, he's like, we can get to the moon in 3 hours. And I saw like a
I didn't see that one.
boy,
A lot of that stuff ends up becoming nonsense under
interesting.
further peer review,
Mm-hmm.
but some of it is real, right? So I don't know on that
Wild.
specific one, but I watch these types of things all the time, and then I go deeper into which is
I figured,
actually.
yeah. If there's anyone that did, it'd be you.
Yeah.
Do you? What I guess in saying that, what do you think? What's the biggest? It could be Bitcoin or non-Bitcoin related. So in that same vein, what's the biggest either a trend or invention or kind of discovery you've been tracking in the last year or last few months or something that's on the horizon even?
I think the two biggest things are Bitcoin and everything that's happening on the layers on Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that Bitcoin is not a technology; it's a protocol. So when you understand it as a protocol that's bounded by energy, you understand you have to think in energy and Bitcoin and how it's a protocol and how protocols come in layers. If you get that, which is complicated to get because most people don't think in protocols, they think in technologies or companies. So that would be a big area of learning, and then you can see opportunities as these Nostr, Bitcoin, Fediment, other things come in together to create all different things on top of this protocol that you can't even imagine from your current bias. So that's one major area of learning and learning, discovery, and opportunity, because all of the world's wealth is going to move here, right? And the other big one is artificial intelligence, and your job won't get replaced by AI tomorrow. You'll get replaced by somebody who knows AI tomorrow. And then that job will get replaced by AI. So there's a wave coming that you better learn this. And those two forces are actually, because the productivity gained by AI should be forcing prices down faster. Right. That's the point. That is the thing that's driving the brake faster to the existing system that has to consolidate all of your time and energy to save you from the thing that should be freeing you. And so those two major trends today are things that you need to understand and how they integrate together and what that looks like. And there's lots, by the way, there's tons of opportunity in these areas too.
Nostr, I know we have a few minutes left. I want to touch on Nostr really quickly here, and then we'll play a little game, a little word association lightning round that I always end with. You've talked about Nostr. Obviously, you spend your time there and not Twitter. Yep. So you've talked about this, and people can go back and look at other interviews. We've talked about it. But do you still see that as a like kind of the example or almost the standard in a way? I don't know if that's the right way to say it necessarily, but do you just see, 5-10 years from now, the communication just being on these protocols and like these decentralized, like Twitter, it probably won't be around in 10 years. I mean, is it going to be that rapid of a change?
Yes.
The
answer is yes, but it won't look like it. So if you went on to Nostr today, if you went on a year ago or more, I was on just after Jack Dorsey tweeted it. I wanted to look at it and say, and then I was, wow, this is already something. So I was on, I think, December 6th or something, a year and a half ago.
Yep.
And if you see the growth in that ecosystem and all the different technologies kind of creating, like at the protocol layer, that are all interoperable together with Bitcoin and all interoperable together, that now new entrepreneurs are building on top of it to extend that. That ecosystem is growing at an crazy rate. Users, not quite yet. So a lot of the users, because the network effect, just like the US dollar network effect on Twitter, people stay because everybody else is there, right? Until you have kind of 10 times more of the value. And then they start to move, and then it unwinds. And so that 10 times more value could come in a number of, like, how do you describe value? That value could come in somebody that's deplatformed on Twitter. They might find Nostr 10 times more value because they always have their user, and they could just go to all the clients, compete for them, and they can't be shut out. So for a small portion of the population that knows this, there's already 10 times the value. And then as entrepreneurs are building onto this and developers are building onto this is creating more value pockets all over the place that are going to bring on waves and waves of more people. And it's going to disrupt the centralized services categorically because they cannot compete the value. Open protocols can innovate crazy fast. Not everything works, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because of the interoperability, you start to, the new entrepreneur, just as it would be a tiny little piece of code on top of this to create something totally different and unique that offers 10 times more value to way more people. And as more people start to understand how fast this is happening, more people will race in, providing it more value, right? They'll be leaving the other things that they ascribe value to while they're doing it, which is a new network effect being born out of the new technology. We're just early in there, but why I'm spending the time there is the reason I'm spending the time on Bitcoin. That's where all the future value is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have 2 more minutes?
Yep.
Okay. What are you reading right now? Is it, it could be personal development stuff. Like, what is it that, makes you? It's not like we were saying earlier, there's the 3%, right? And like, I say this because it comes from a place of like, for 25 years of my life, I'm 37. I've just wondered like what makes certain people tick. And like, again, there's a 3%, they fought the Revolutionary War, and there's something that made those people tick. And the other 97% were, a lot of them were British loyalists. And they was like, whatever, like I'm good being a serf, or I'm good, like whatever. And that to the end of my life, I will always question why that is. I just I can't square that circle. So what is it that makes you tick? Like, what are the, not the frameworks you're studying, but, the books you read, like what goes, I mean, how do you become you? I guess is a cliche or like this weird way of saying it in a sense, but how do you tick in a sense? Because it's me. Like I mean, your book. I forgot I had your book back here. I've had it up here so long, but I just realized earlier. So,
well, thanks for the advertising on it. The
it's important.
So,
important book.
By the way, your question there is a question I think about all the time, and what I've come to, I could spend hours
Same.
and hours and days on this specific topic, and why I do the things I do, why do others do the things they do, why do we all, what idiosyncrasies, what incongruences do we have in our thinking, in my own thinking, and then how do I fix that, and why do I do that? Why did I think this before? What did it? So I do a lot of reading, and so anytime I'm probably reading 3 to 5 books, I typically, it hasn't been updated in a while, but I typically keep a list of kind of some of my favorites on my website. And I think there's 300 books there or 400 books there, and I need to update it. So I'm constantly reading, but deeper than that, what I realized is this: we're all connected. Every single one of us is all connected. We're the supercomputer. It's not the AI that's the supercomputer. We're the supercomputer through these connections, and these connections inform us, and they make us smarter and smarter. And we can never leave even this call with you right now, we can never leave it the same person as we were when we started it. And all of these connections of every single person who ever touches our life, whether we know they touched our life or not, changes us, and that's who we become. Who we become. And if you from there, what you start to see is the beauty and the love in everybody. And everybody is looking for the same thing. So I've categorized this in my brain, and we're all searching for love and belonging. It's why we do everything. Every single thing is in service of that. We tell ourselves a lie a lot of times that no, it's for this, right? But the reason why somebody wants to make more money is not to make more pieces of paper. It's to have enough things to do so their family loves them, or they're respected. Same. Why am I on your podcast right now? To try to make impact on other people, to help them see, and if you go deeper on that, it is love and belonging, right? It's like, why does that matter to you? And so I'm not saying that's a bad thing or it's a good, but a lot of times that very same thing can keep us trapped in our own system, because I use the victim analogy all the time, because it's easy everybody knows somebody who's a victim. They're a victim because they want somebody they're lacking that love and belonging. So they want people to come and come closer. And when those people find that relationship hard and they move further away, the victim typically doubles down and creates more drama. And what I've realized to try to get people to come close, and from that you have to go pretty simply. Love is all around them all the time, and they're the only one that doesn't know it, and they're pushing it away with all their might. And so if that's true for the victim, then a simple question out of that is, where are you the victim in your life? Because I would say these things are really easy, like crazy easy. Because when you see everyone else as a reflection of you and just their love and blah and what they're really looking for, you get out of the nonsense of what kind of you see deeper and how we're all connected. And I don't know. So I've done a lot of work myself trying to understand why we do the things we do, and then to try to see that in others, to try and also to better myself in that process.
Boy. It's funny, and it's some other time we'll have to sit and talk for an hour, just doing it all on that. And the shame of this world that we live in, this fiat system, which is what really the genesis of your book and everything you talk about, and a lot of Bitcoiners in general, of you're in this weird world where, we talk about price a lot. It's like we said earlier, the very first thing, it's kind of this debate to get people in, unfortunately, because we're so worried about that. We're like, if I had my choice, I would never talk about price. I can't stand talking about price.
I don't.
I know. But you got to suck people in a way in this fiat system we live in, because that's what everyone's so worried about, because that's what fiat does to people. And it's like, gosh, can't we talk about real things like this? But it won't get clicks. Like, people won't watch. People, it's wild.
Yeah, but I don't know if I agree with that. So it might not get as many clicks because our attention is captured, right? Mm-hmm. Think about yourself slowing down in a car crash. Your attention is captured by the negative or something. So news just plays on grabbing your attention, mm-hmm. and there's a lot of car crashes. And then how do you get seen more car crashes, right? Something crazier. Because everybody talks about the crazy and the edge, and it's not what the world looks like. Like, go talk to your friends, get outside, go to the woods. That's not the word. Now, if you're living in that all the time, it will be a reflection back to you. It will look exactly like that, and you think the world looks like that. And the world, and when you realize that, is everybody's going through the world, describing the world as a mere reflection of their own beliefs.
Yeah.
But now carry it to the podcast. It doesn't matter if it gets clicks, because if you actually cared about a deeper level, if you touched one soul, mm-hmm. one person, and in a deep and meaningful way that changed them, and then they never said it was you, and you didn't care if it was you, and they went on to touch millions of other people. Is that better than having a whole bunch of clicks? Now, I would argue if you're arguing for, I can't make enough money doing that.
Right. That's a different, yeah.
But then what you're saying is, I'm going to sell more car crashes to get paid and keep the system going. And by doing so. So these are the incongruencies in our thinking that you really have to get to the bottom of the why you do the things you do. And then once you realize why you're doing it, and if you're doing it for kind of the real reason, just do it and don't care.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I talk to my wife about this all the time. And it's like, God love her family. friends and stuff like that. But, you know, like, as you know, a lot of them don't care to talk about these things, or at least they're not at the place in their life, which you just kind of outlined, to talk about or want to talk about it. And it's beyond frustrating, where it's like, man, you could spend hours. We could spend all day talking about this. And it's like, where the, you know, I guess you have to find the people with ears to hear and eyes to see. Like you said, if it gets one person to watch it, that's what's most important. And that's where that's why I continue doing it. Cause it's like, you know, yeah, it's not paying bills. It's, you know, but it's the mission, right? It's the mission. It's why we do it. So anyway, all right, to wrap up here, because you've been overly generous with your time, a little segment presented by Bitcoin Trading Cards, which Jeff will at some point will be gracing here. You know, the book / Jeff himself, whatever. So watch out for that here in the future here. But just a little lightning round game to wrap. So we got to, you know, I don't know, 15, 18 words, something like that. So just whatever comes to your mind. It could be a word, it could be a couple words, whatever comes to mind. Satoshi Nakamoto.
Freedom.
Compulsory government-run schools.
Crime.
The U.S. presidential election.
Theater.
Canadian truckers.
What happens in a free market that pretends to be a free market under the guise of the state?
Privacy.
Imperative.
Central banking.
Perhaps the greatest scam known to history.
Let's see this one. Don Cherry, Hockey Night in Canada, 30 years the host.
At first, fantastic and car crashes, but for
Saturday night car crash.
Yeah, exactly, and then jump the shark later in his career.
Boy, I had to throw it out to you because there's not many people that would get that or understand. So anyone can look that up that doesn't know. Bitcoin conferences.
I love them because I get to meet a whole bunch of really great people. I typically like the smaller ones better.
John Maynard Keynes.
He wrote something that I wrote it in my book. I just can't remember the exact same things, but living under constructs of former dead economists, right? That and then he became that person, and so the number of how much nonsense is ascribed to him. But I think he would roll over in his grave to what the things under his name have actually led to. I think because he couldn't understand how human incentives would be warped to that.
Wild. Absolutely wild. Elon Musk.
This is a fantastic entrepreneur or salesperson, but not deep enough or a blind spot here, whether that's knowing or unknowing, to protect his ego.
Wow, yeah, that's a great explanation. I couldn't agree more. Women in Bitcoin.
So many great minds and so many great minds that are entering into Bitcoin. There's so many women in Bitcoin that are entering in.
So cool. 3D printing.
Early still, but inevitable.
Love that. It's gonna be amazing. Travel.
As somebody who's traveled to about over 80 countries, I love travel. I love getting to a community that you read about and it totally blows your mind because they're the same people all over the world. Same hopes, same dreams, same everything else all over the world.
It's incredible. Michael Saylor.
Just a brilliant, brilliant person in Bitcoin, deep understanding.
And I had Andreas, so you can say this. However, I'm kind of pausing it here because I wanted to know who was the person that you studied to really start understanding Bitcoin. That's really the question, I guess.
Sorry, can you say that again? You just bumped your internet.
So I had Andreas Antonopoulos on here, but it was more of a question
Yep.
to who did you study actually to develop your understanding of Bitcoin?
So Andre was excellent,
Okay.
but but I think this is my why. This is why, and I said it before when we were talking about that connection to different people. I can't even tell you. I don't think about it as who are the top minds in Bitcoin and think about kind of a strata layer that there. I think about it. I can learn anything from anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how. So different frameworks to understand, different ideas, and sometimes somebody will say it that it will have no views, no understanding, right? No, they don't have a huge audience and everything else, and they've brought in an insight. So then somebody else says it, or maybe somebody else paraphrases and it takes it to something, and it came from somebody else that they don't even know. That's how this network works, and so it's what I see more from that is how we are all so connected into it and the learning from each other as this goes. And you can learn from anybody.
Then last couple here, Bitcoin trading cards.
Sorry, you just bumped again.
Just the last couple, Bitcoin trading cards.
Yeah. About to be on them.
That's the first person we had say that. So that's I love that. Last two, the price of tomorrow.
Glad I wrote it. I'm really glad I wrote it. Sorry, one more time. I missed it.
The price of tomorrow is the last two.
Yeah, so glad I wrote the price of tomorrow.
And EgoDeathCapital.
Can't believe I get to do what I get to do with an amazing group of people doing it.
So cool. So cool. Thank you so much for your time, Jeff. I know you said it on Scott's interview, so I'll say it, but I know you said you're thinking of writing another book and kind of working on something. So absolutely incredible. But I would love a Jeff Booth frameworks book because I have my own that I'm like writing to my children of like all the frameworks of my life and just like how I think about things and whatever. But that would be an incredible book to have, just the Jeff book, first principles book, or frameworks, because I think that's why everyone loves hearing you talk, because you're so consistent in your messaging, but it comes from first principles and frameworks. So it's beautiful.
And I was thinking, and thanks for that. I'm actually thinking of including a number of the different frameworks just that I just naturally use in the book to be able to describe how to stay in that spot or how to improve on that spot. That's exactly what's but thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's the thing that at least whether it's a sailor or you, it could be an aunt or uncle, the people that are successful in life and they're so consistent, it comes down to these first principles, but no one teaches these frameworks or the decision making. As we said in the government compulsory run schools, that ain't taught. So fascinating.
And then once you understand that, kind of that's it. And same thing if you treat yourself as the vehicle of learning instead of then if the framework is producing an inferior result,
yes,
right, then change framework, right? And so that if ironically that framework is actually something I just turn inward on myself and think about what does this look like. So
amazing. Where can people find you?
Probably EgoDeathCapital, Jeff at EgoDeathCapital's or EgoDeathCapital website, or I always ask people to look at my website, my personal website, jeffbooth.ca, because it'll have my Nostr pub key or any social media that I'm on will always be there. If it's not there, then it's a scammer.
Thank you so incredibly much and being overly generous with your time today. I apologize we ran over a bit, and got to cut an hour, so we're going to keep going. You. So I appreciate you, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you for checking out this episode of the Playable Characters Show, brought to you by Bitcoin Trading Cards. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the future Bitcoin and financial experts we have on the show. Plus, we will be doing random big giveaways throughout different moments of shows, of collectible cards, sats, merch, and more from guests, so you won't miss anything. This show does not constitute any investment advice, only freedom advice. Everything you see here is opinions from the host and the guests themselves, nothing further. Please don't trust, verify. For full transparency, I do lead marketing efforts at Bitcoin Trading Cards, where we are trying to spread freedom to all of humanity and orange pill the world, one collectible physical trading card at a time, by making things fun and easy to talk about that normally make you want to cry. You can reach me directly through my email, brandon@btc-cards.com, with any inquiries or playable character suggestions. See you on the next one.